Hey folks, we're gonna get into one of the schools of thought that's emerging in China right now, and this is a little bit of the first part of this is going to overlap what's going on in the textbook. But in the textbook, it talks about the period of the Warring States, and at the conclusion of that, or at least partway through it, we have sort of this big social confusion that emerges on different ideas of how to build a more just society, and this period is called the era of 100 schools of thought. I don't know if there's actually 100 schools of thought, but three definitely emerged to be pretty influential later. So probably not anywhere near 100, but there probably were a good amount. But you've got Confucianism. We're going to really talk about that, or at least touch on it because it influences where we're going here in a second. We have another called Taoism, and then we have legalism. Uh, a little bit of legalism we need to mention here is just a really strict kind of enforcement policy that we're not going to tolerate anything. Everything will be punished. You could get into serious trouble for dumping ashes in the street. Um, and so that's going to play into this a little bit. um, but the big player here is Confucianism. And one of the ideas here, really kind of before that, is Confucius wasn't really that popular while he was alive. He kind of came off a little bit as out of touch, and a lot of people sort of shunned him. In his early years, it wasn't really until after he died that a lot of his ideas kind of took off and really spread. Um, And one of the big ideas that he promoted that was really promoted by his followers later on that took off was this idea of a hierarchy of respect. The idea here is that superiors should absolutely care for their inferiors. So the king, the district leaders in China and other places should absolutely care and take care to better the lives of their inferiors, their subjects. And those inferiors should very much give respect to the king and the district leaders as their superiors and obey them. So very much applies to the governmental systems. That goes, like I said, goes for the kings and their subject. It goes all the way down to the family unit. Within the family, fathers should absolutely be obeyed. They should look to take care of their families as a unit, to look after their wives and their children, and those wives and children should absolutely defer 100% to those male figures in the household. What's really cool is that Confucianism virtues take hold eventually with the Chinese public, with Chinese officials. A lot of rulers are going to procure Confucian philosophers as advisors. A lot of them were pretty pragmatic and honest. And what's really neat, though, is just like it says in the textbook, that Chinese language filters out of China and influences other Asian countries. You can find a lot of Chinese words, Chinese symbols that filter out into Japan, into Korea, into Vietnam, and stuff like that. Confucianism does the same thing. And Confucianism even influences heavily the Korean legal system in the years ahead. And so that's kind of where we're going. And one of the things, to sort of backtrack, sorry, a little bit, is that sometimes this can go a little bit sideways. Sorry about the camera shake there. I didn't realize I was doing that. Having responsibilities to your subordinates a lot of times means that you are ultimately responsible for what your subordinates do. Remember, the king is responsible for making these people's lives better, but also the king is responsible if stuff goes bad, if stuff goes sideways. And the same thing with, the family unit. If your kid commits a crime in this society where Confucianism ideals, as well as that influence from legalism, is being pretty heavily weighed, then the parents could likewise be punished for those crimes. And there's examples of this pretty heavily. And that sounds like, wow, that's kind of unusual, but we hear about this stuff today. Think about it. Anytime we have sort of a mass shooting, especially like a school shooting with somebody that's a young adult or somebody that's even under 18, we don't really hear it out of the legal system, but out of social circles, sometimes you'll hear that, oh, well, they should go and arrest the parents too, because the parents weren't watching the kid, or the parents were probably instilling some of this anger that the kid was feeling. And so the parents were responsible for the child's actions in these ideas. And so, we still hear about these sort of, kind of hierarchy of responsibility things today. And, it's probably not influenced by Confucianism. It's just that we sort of, we need somebody to blame. And it's, um, and so we kind of buy into this stuff. So don't feel like that, this is completely out of the ballpark, out of, the norm of what we're going into. Really quick, as an aside, this video is about to go pretty dark. It's going to have some rough content that if you do watch this, if you do watch my videos with your kids, what are you mad at your children or something? Come here, you're in trouble. I'm going to make you watch history videos. Oh, please. But but this is about to get pretty dark, and so if you do watch my history videos, I don't know why you would make them do this, but if you do watch this with younger siblings or your own children or something like that, you might want to watch this one first without them to see. It's not going to go too graphic or really super dark, but it is pretty rough. And so I would probably preview this before you watch it with them, because it's some bad stuff's about to happen. So anyway, like I said though, Confucianism is going to spread out from China. We've been seeing this a lot. This is really cool. We've seen this with a lot of different religions, how they spread out to other geographic regions. We've seen this with a lot of language, ideas of government, trade, and stuff like that. Well, same thing's happening here. Confucianism is going to spread a lot to Asian regions. And like I said a few minutes ago, it's really going to be incorporated into the Korean legal system of the Choson dynasty, Choson. And what we're going to talk about is way after the class would normally end as far as time frames. Usually I typically end this class in 1400, and this happens in 1750 in Korea. But it's a fantastic example of the way that the different, philosophies, languages, and ideas and stuff filter out. And it's also a really cool example of the way even the most benevolent sort of ideas can go awry. And me personally, it's a really crazy, messed up story. And that, as me as a historian, those are my favorite kinds of stories, are just the ones that are absolutely off the wall, sort of bonkers. So like I said, this goes down in 1750 Korea. Confucianism has taken hold in the legal system there. Confucianism generally is a good philosophy, but anything, if you apply it kind of sideways, it can go really messed up. in the way it's enforced and the way it forces people's hands sometimes. I'm not sure if that's the way I would phrase that, but who knows? Um, anyway, the leader in Korea right now is King Jong-jo, Yongjo. Not sure why I'm spelling all these, because you don't have to remember the spelling of these guys. So King Jong-jo is the leader of Korea at the time. The important person for us is Crown Prince Sado, Sado. Now, from the time Prince Sado was really small, he was a very, very difficult child. He did have some sort of mental illness. He had some hallucinations, which could be attributed to all sorts of different causes. Uh, so he does have some hallucinations. He does have some violent tendencies. Um, Please don't think that I'm saying most mentally challenged people have those. Probably 99% of mentally challenged people don't have any kind of violent tendencies. It's just this dude does. Um, and it is recorded that early on he tries to resist a lot of these violent urges, but he just wasn't able to. Not going to really go into all the details on that. If you'll want to look him up, you can find some of this stuff. It's pretty easy to locate. Anyway, on top of having some mental instability stuff, he also is going to be king at some point. And so the king, Jong-jo, has to do some stuff that, hey, my kid is eventually going to be responsible for all of Korea. He will have to make some pretty heavy decisions, and we have to prep him for those ideas. And so one of the early things that the king does when Sado is 13 or 14 years old. Keep in mind, this is a 13 or 14-year-old kid. We're about to lay this on him. King Jong-jo gives him a job. This 13-year-old kid, his responsibility is to review capital court decisions. Capital cases are cases that may result in death. If you get charged in a capital crime, you have the possibility of facing the death penalty. So we're going to take this 13-year-old kid, and he's going to review capital court cases and be the ultimate decision maker on them, whether this person lives or dies. He is sometimes finalizing these things, sometimes reversing the sentence of the judge. And, he's doing this day after day after day. And this is going to impact him. Think about that for a second. What impact would that have on you as a 13-year-old, that you are making decisions whether people live or die? And, we worry about different jobs that people have. People are going into combat or something like that, and the impact that has on their psyche when they come back, because it does change people. And we're concerned about that as adults, that happens. And imagine how that's going to impact a 13-year-old that is sending people to their deaths possibly. When I was a 13-year-old, I was reading comic books and building homemade ramps to fly off of on my bike. This kind of stuff would have very much probably warped me, probably would warp anybody. And Sado is doing that every single day, multiple times a day for several years. So he is deciding who lives and who dies on this stuff as a 13-year-old. So on top of him struggling with some mental illness, he's also being very clearly shown as a young teenager that life doesn't matter that much. Hey, you have to take these 5 or 6 cases today and decide which one of these guys lives or dies. So he's being shown that life doesn't really matter that much, on top of being, mentally unstable there. So starting around this time, probably around 15 or something, Sado already for the last year or so has routinely beat his servants. A lot of the times they would have struggles getting him dressed. in the mornings and stuff like that, and he would fly into a rage and beat several people. At the age of 15, he starts elevating. We're doing more than just beating. At that time, when he was 15 years old, he killed one of the palace servants, and he cut off the head of the servants and took the head to show the ladies in waiting. Hey, check it out. Look what I did. Cool. It doesn't make any attempt to hide this at all. This is, hey, for the last 2 years, I've been deciding, who lives and who dies. I just did this one personally. I don't really get the big deal. So he doesn't make any attempt to hide it. Later on, he also begins raping the female servants around the palace, physically abusing the female servants as well. And early on, the king just yelled at Sado for doing these things. Not a lot else can be done. Remember, Confucian ideology is in play here, and we have a heavy relationship, or a heavy emphasis, sorry, on those relationships. And if Crown Prince Sado is determined to be a criminal, well, what's that say? That says his dad is also somewhat responsible. Dad and mom are also somewhat responsible. So if Sado is branded a criminal, the father could be branded a criminal as well. The problem here, and usually that's not an issue, we just, kill everybody. But the problem here is that Zhangzhou is king. And so the king is a criminal? What does that mean for the entire Choson dynasty? Would this topple the government of Korea? This is a larger thing than just a small family responsibility deal. It also kind of helps that the people that Crown Prince Sado is raping and murdering are very low status. These are servants around the palace. He can kind of get away with these things and not really face a tremendous amount of pushback other than a stern talking to with dad occasionally. At one point, Zhangzhou does call for Sado and says, hey, what's going on here? Why are you doing these things? And Sado says, that simply that when anger grips him, he has to kill something in order to calm himself. And he says it could be a person, it could be a chicken, it could be whatever, but he has to kill something to quiet the rage that he's feeling. I'm not really sure why they didn't just make him the palace butcher. Hey, we are having chicken tonight. You're going to knock out these 43 chickens and settle down. I don't know why they didn't think of that. That's something that I thought of, but I'm a weird guy. So the king can't really stop him. The king can't really say, well, you're a criminal. We're going to lock you up, or we're going to kill you because you have been killing lots and lots of people. If Sado is charged with a crime and convicted, the whole Choson dynasty will collapse. So we're in this weird catch-22 sort of situation that we can't really stop him, but also we can't really allow this to go on. It's kind of a messed up scene. So something has to happen. So we can allow Sado to be dethroned and, in the dynasty. Hey, that's a responsibility. We have a responsibility to the people of Korea as the royal family to take care of them. Or we can continue to be the royal family and let this kind of pass, because also we have a responsibility to take care of the people of Korea. And if the Choson dynasty gets demolished, then the country will probably go into a state of civil war or something like that. And so, we have these responsibilities tugging at us from both sides. And so there's not a clear out here because of the way that we're applying Confucian ideology. So we're not really sure. So anyway, Sado kicks things up again. Not only at this point is he occasionally killing a servant, around the palace. Sometimes he'll go even further. He'll dress up as a commoner. He'll sneak out of the palace and go missing for several days, and nobody knows what the heck he's doing. Nobody knows where he's going. Nobody knows what's up, and then he'll come back. Uh, he's going out to the public and hanging out with the commoners. There's no telling how many people he's killing out there. And that's, I'm sure he's not, hey, I just want to go and hang out as a normal person, maybe go watch a movie or something like that. No, he's going out, going murder happy. So who knows what he's doing out there? Well, he's getting older. Things are progressing. The king's getting older. Zhangzhou's getting older. And in 1759, Sado is made regent. He is next in line for the throne. That's kind of messed up that I laughed there. So he ups things once again because, honestly, this doesn't excuse it, but, he does know that he's next in line for the throne. That's probably an increased stress. And so the rage issues that he's feeling are going to be exacerbated because he's got a little bit more pressure on him because he eventually is going to be responsible for all this. And that is stressful, and that's going to probably manifest in his murdery thing. And he is now feeling even more openly aggressive. If somebody says something that the regent doesn't like, he kills them. He kills fortune tellers, astronomers, several medical doctors, lots and lots of servants. It gets so bad that every single day there are bodies as well as seriously wounded people that are being carried out of the palace. And so now it's kind of getting out in the public that something is going on in the palace. There's a stream of dead and seriously wounded people coming out of the palace every day. Something's amiss up there on the hill. And so now at this point, the situation's untenable. We can't allow this dude to be king. We also can't just murder him because we'll have to, charge him with a crime or something like that and execute him. At that point, Sado's own mother, this is kind of wild. I mean, imagine that, his mother has to jump in and says, we have to do something. My kid is really going after things. And so she convinces King Zhangzhou that Sado needs to be executed. And as much as it pains her, she says it's for the good of the dynasty as well as the protection of any potential victims. We have a responsibility to the people of Korea, to the people immediately around us, that we can't allow this to continue. And oh my gosh, what happens if you kick the bucket and then Sado is made king? I mean, he's just going to murder everybody. So we really can't allow this to continue. And she convinces him something absolutely needs to be done. But we're back to that problem of, familial responsibilities and things. If Sado is executed as a criminal, then the Choson dynasty, King Zhangzhou, will be seen as a criminal as well. He'll have to be executed as well. And then who knows who's going to take over at that point? Probably leads Korea into a civil war with lots and lots of death. So King Zhangzhou comes up with a plan. It is his son, but from most accounts, Zhangzhou pretty much hated Sado always, and so it kind of makes it easier a little bit to kill his own son. Sado was meditating one day, and he was called in to go and see the king, and the king orders Sado to step inside of a rice chest. And a rice chest is a 4-foot by 4-foot box. It's just a big 4-foot cube. And he orders Sado to step inside of this, and we're going to seal you up inside this. And the crown prince doesn't want to do this, but he's under familial responsibilities. He has to obey his father, and his father's also the king, so you've got double kind of a thing there. And Sado's wife isn't present. She actually writes this really kind of really well documented diary. She documents lot of stuff of palace life, and she writes about all this stuff. She's not in the room, but she's near enough where she can hear Sado pleading for his life. That he knows that if I go inside that box, they're going to lock me inside and leave me to die. And so he's pleading for his life. He doesn't want to die. He's killed all these people. He knows it's a bad scene. But from Zhangzhou at the king's point of view, he's killed dozens of people at this point, probably more than that, because he's been on this for several years at this point. And as horrific as this is, it's kind of hard to feel sorry for him. And so he's locked up in the box, and he's not given food or water. And after 8 days, Sado dies. But here's the deal. The family spins this. Sado wasn't executed. Sado willingly stepped into that box. Nobody forced him to. The king told him to do it. But Sado could have, run away or absolutely refused or something like that. And the family says he wasn't executed. He was never put on trial. Did you see a trial? I didn't see a trial. He wasn't put on trial. He wasn't executed. He willingly, this is what they're arguing, he willingly stepped into that box and sacrificed himself because he had an illness. And he had this illness, and he wanted to sacrifice himself to keep that illness from spreading and infecting other people in Korea. And so they argue publicly that he sacrificed himself. And it's kind of interesting because that fits in the context of Confucian ideology. Nobody here was a criminal. Sado wasn't executed. He sacrificed himself. And so the King Zhangzhou, the rest of the family line is safe. Sado's son, later on, he had a son with his wife who didn't have any kind of issues. Later on, Sado's son was made regent, and he becomes king. And so the family line is uninterrupted. And the Choson dynasty continues in Korea for the next 150 years. And so it's really cool. I like that story because it's a really weird, messed up story. But it's also really interesting that, in this case, a Chinese philosophy makes its way to Korea, impacts a royal family on how they deal with a mentally ill murderer in order to maintain their position and the stability of the country. And it's really kind of neat how that idea spread out, just like a lot of ideas. That's a lot of what we've been reading about and talking about is the spread of ideas. Religions, philosophies, technologies and stuff, how all of this stuff spreads out into other countries and regions and impacts them. And so that's kind of a neat thing. So hopefully you like that story. If you do want to check it out, there is a podcast that goes into a lot more depth. It is a lot more graphic, by the way, if you do choose to listen to it. But I think it's called Noble Blood. And this episode's called The Rice Chest. And it explores the whole Crown Prince Sado stuff. It also explores a lot of other nobility cases and stuff like that, if you're into that, if you want to check it out even more so. So anyway, that's that story. If you want to let your children or younger siblings listen to it, that's your call. Tried to keep it pretty tame for here. And we'll see you in the discussion boards. Thanks for hanging out.